Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm, and on today's show, we are going to recap Glory 28, Invicta FC 16, World Series of Fighting 29, and I'm also going to preview UFC Fight Night Brisbane, Hunt versus Mir this Saturday, March 19th on Fox Sports 1. And also, in just a minute, as I mentioned, Invicta FC 16, we will be recapping that event. And to join me to recap that event in a few minutes will be Invicta President Shannon Knapp. Will join me on the program to talk about her organization's most recent fight. But before we get to Shannon Knapp and Invicta, let's first get to World Series of Fighting 29. I know we normally don't start off with World Series of Fighting, but that's where we're going to start first because a lot of headlines stemming from it, mainly with the main event star, Justin Gaethje. And before anyone notices, yes, I'm going solo today. We had a scheduling conflict with Colin and Billy, so they weren't able to join me for the show this week, but they should be able to rejoin me for next week's program. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. And as I was alluding to, Justin Gaethje, he is the man in a little bit of heat now, stemming from his victory at World Series of Fighting 29, where he just absolutely demolished Brian Foster very quickly into the first round with really it was just about 3 leg kicks that did in Brian Foster, and that was about it. And boy, 143 into the opening round, and Gaethje's destroyed some guys before, but this may be his most impressive stoppage. I thought Brian Foster, with his knockout power, his toughness, and also some of his wrestling ability, I thought he would actually give Gaethje a little bit of a problem last Saturday, but he didn't. He just absolutely demolished him, and it really begs the question, how much is left for him in World Series of Fighting? I really think Brian Foster may be the last guy they can get to test Justin Gaethje. I mean, he's ran through everybody that World Series of Fighting has put through him. The only person he hasn't finished in the World Series of Fighting is Melvin Guillard, but that was a very dominant performance. And now Guillard, he's lost 2 straight fights in a row since moving on to Bellator. So it's not like that's as credible of as a win as it was just November of 2014. Now here in March of 2016, he already fought Palomino twice, knocked him out twice. He knocked out Nick Newell. In his debut, he stopped JZ Cavalcante. He beat Joe Lazone's brother, Dan Lazone. And now he's beating Brian Foster. I mean, there's not really much left for him to test here. 16-0, 13 knockouts. He's 27. He's still in the prime of his career. It's time for him to move on, and hopefully he can do that now. However, like I said, the headline coming from this event is that the Colorado State Athletic Commission has actually suspended indefinitely Justin Gaethje for his post-win antics, where he did a backflip off the top of the cage. Now, this is nothing new for Justin Gaethje. He actually has done this, I think, 2 or 3 times before after his victories inside the World Series of Fighting Decagon, but no commission has gave him any trouble with doing that. However, the Colorado State Boxing Commission did have an issue with it, citing that the 27-year-old from that state of Colorado was conducting unsportsmanlike conduct and will be suspended indefinitely. Now, according to an article on SheerDog.com, which was dated March 15th, there has not been an actual length of suspension noted for the World Series of Fighting champion. Now, I can't imagine this being too long of a suspension. I think this is more of a fine type of thing. And like I said, this is not the first time Justin Gaethje has done such a thing. Now, is it smart for him to jump off the top of the cage? No. But if the guy wants to jump off the top of the cage and possibly injure himself, that's on him. So I'm not really sure what the issue is here with the Colorado State Boxing Commission. I really don't. Is it unsportsmanlike? I don't think so. He wasn't taunting Brian Foster. He's just happy that he's won. He's not, again, he probably shouldn't be doing the backflip off the top of the cage just because for sake of injury. But that, if he wants to do that, go for it. As long as he doesn't hit anyone else in the process, I really don't see what the issue is here. So hopefully for Justin Gaethje, the suspension doesn't hold up him moving to another organization or buying out his contract or whatever the case may be, because I don't think there's much left for him here in the World Series of Fighting. That was about it for World Series of Fighting. There really wasn't much else that went on for their 29th event this time from Colorado. So let's move right along to Glory 28 Paris. Huge night of fights for Glory. 3 title fights for them. 2 of them were in the newly minted Fight Pass Super Fight Series. So we'll start with some of the undercard on that Super Fight Series first. Just wanted to mention Josh Jancy had a very nice performance and win, as he was able to win via second round doctor stoppage, as he really busted up the nose of Johan Takak. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, but Jancy, of course, came off a loss in his last fight, so nice bounce back win. And of course, we'll get to the lightweight division in just a moment, as they had a lightweight contenders tournament. But I think Jancy with the win, he's top 5 in the division. He moves up. Also, could be fight of the night. I don't know. It was a very excellent fight. The very first fight of the night, as Yurk took on Naid Salmani. And boy, these 2 guys were just throwing down, back and forth. First round, definitely the man from France, Eddie, as I'll just call him. I won't try to pronounce that last name, but Eddie, I thought, had a very good first round against Maycole, and really, to me, dominated. In fact, I thought it came close to finishing Yurk. And then rounds 2 and 3, Yurk started to get his second wind about him, started to answer, started to throw more volume. And I think Eddie, because of that success in the first round and output, I think tired him out for rounds 2 and 3. And the Brazilian Yurk was able to come back and get a decision victory. Jason Wilness, a guy in the top 10 of Glory's middleweight division, was able to take out Verlinden. Wasn't very impressed by Verlinden being the taller guy, the rangier guy. He really was apt to just stand and throw in the pocket against the Dutchman Wilness, who, of course, I didn't think had that great a performance in his loss to Joe Schilling. Looked better in this matchup. Kind of called out Dustin Jacoby in the end. Of course, Jacoby, just winning the middleweight tournament, has a guaranteed shot at some point in time this year at the middleweight championship. I'm not sure if Jason Wilness is quite ready for that yet. He so far has had kind of mediocre results in Glory. Of course, he's lost to 3 of the 4 top guys, and Joe Schilling, Artem Levin, and Simon Marcus already. Now, he does have a win over Wayne Barrett. That was all the way back at Glory 18. I wouldn't be opposed to him taking on Barrett again, who, of course, was the runner-up in the tournament just last month at Glory 27. So that could be a likely scenario for Jason Wilness. Moving along to the last non-title fight here of the Super Fight Series, Cameo against Vigny in the heavyweight division. Just a scrap, 2 guys just throwing at each other here in the heavyweight division. For the young man Vigny, giving up a lot of experience to his opponent Cameo. 9-1 entering this fight now, 10-1 against Freddie Cameo. Again, fighting his home country for France, came into the fight with a record of 65-22 with the draw. But the difference in this matchup was the height. 6'8" is Xavier Vigny to just 6'2" for the Frenchman. And that was a big difference in this fight. The reach and height of Vigny really gave him an advantage. I think he started to wear down a little bit. He was landing his jab early and often in this fight, and I think that really kept Cameo at bay, and that really frustrated him. Obviously, the height and reach did stop him for the most part from landing too many powerful bombs. I think his conditioning was a little better. He caught a second win. He was getting better as the fight went on, but that constant jab and just because of his height, the power Vigny was bringing to the table was too much for Cameo to try to overcome late, and Vigny gets the win. And Vigny is a guy that, depending on his energy level, he could factor in for the heavyweight tournament coming up in Copenhagen. And that's next month for Glory, as Nicky Holtzkin will put his title on the line once again in the welterweight division. And just kind of looking over that event real quickly, I'm trying to see if they did amount, and it looks like they have still yet to announce the heavyweight participants. So possibly Vigny, with this victory, he's now 6-0 in Glory. He could factor in that. Obviously, I think Anderson Silva, with his victory last month at Glory 27, I think he factors in. I think Guito Insante, who had that spinning back kick knockout at Glory 27, I think he factors in. Possibly Vigny. And the fourth participant, I'm not really sure, but if Vigny, if he can recover quickly, I mean, it's about a month away in Copenhagen. I think he could be a dark horse for that tournament, even taking on guys like Anderson Silva and Insante. Let's get to the two title fights that were on the Super Fight Series, starting first in the featherweight division as the Jaguar Amrani took on Sergey Adamchuk, the defending champion, for the first time trying to defend his title successfully. And what a performance by Adamchuk, and what a lack of performance by Amrani, the Jaguar. Me and a lot of others really thought that the Jaguar would be able to become the featherweight champion relatively easy. And no offense to Adamchuk, but the Jaguar has had a great run as of late, and he ran through three other top contenders in the division with no sweat in the featherweight tournament not too long ago. But the Jaguar, maybe he got too confident from that tournament, or maybe he saw that Sergey had a weak chin. I'm not really sure what was the case, but he went headhunting and was throwing a lot of powerful bombs, wide looping hooks, and Adamchuk was able to get out of the way or block almost all those shots in the first round. And heading into the second round, I think already by the time the second round came around, that Amrani had already kind of punched himself out, and Adamchuk just was throwing straight combinations down the middle. He mixed up nice to the head and body kicks. He threw in a spinning back fist, had a couple of spin kicks, and really everything was just short, precise, crisp, and right down the middle. And you add in making Amrani miss for 15 minutes, it ended up being a relatively easy victory. And I think if the Jaguar is able to get a rematch against Adamchuk, I think he either has to pace himself or throw more, maybe less power shots, but he's going to have to change his strategy, because that's not the strategy to beat Adamchuk. And I think he really put the featherweight division on notice, which is weird because he's the champion. But he was definitely the underdog in this matchup, and I think beating a guy the caliber of the Jaguar and really making him look bad in the process is, I think, a big deal. And it could be a long reign here for Adamchuk if he can keep up performances like that. Getting to the light heavyweight title, as Kalavari took on Vahitov, rather. Vahitov, much like Adamchuk, short, precise, down the middle, quick combinations, and really shots to the body, mainly with the hooks to the body, and hooks and uppercuts to the body with some kicks as well. But those really affected the Brazilian Kalavari, who, a little taller, maybe a little bigger, a little stronger than the Russian Artem Vahitov. But those body shots really hurt Kalavari early and often. I think that really sapped his conditioning as this fight moved on. And I think by the time this hit the third and the fourth round, Kalavari was just kind of running on instinct and running on fumes. And we saw Vahitov just keep coming, just combination out. He definitely took some leg kicks. He definitely did. Kalavari did as well, but some power punches. But for the most part, Vahitov was able to block and miss most of the big, powerful shots that Kalavari is capable of, and that's really what plagued them in the first time these two met, going back to Glory 28 in Dubai, April of last year, so just about a year ago. And I think that was a learning experience for Vahitov. I think he was able to put all that together and come up with the perfect game plan to take on the champion Kalavari. And just a perfect performance. And for Kalavari, he's going to have to work on his defense to the hooks and uppercuts to the body, and maybe work on his conditioning a little bit, and he can be right back in the thick of things. I mean, he definitely has the power to knock out anyone in this division. And obviously, he's already beat Vahitov once. He could beat him again, but he's going to really have to change up his strategy. That same strategy he used in the first victory was not working here in this second stanza. And now we see a new light heavyweight champion in Vahitov. Moving on to the main card, which then switched over to ESPN3 from the Fight Pass. And we first saw, let's get to the feature fight first before we get to the tournament. I want to talk about the tournament as a whole. Myrtle Gronhart taking on Cedric Doumbé. And this was a bizarre fight. It just didn't seem like Gronhart wanted to fight Doumbé. I don't know if he thought that he should be the welterweight champion after his last fight against Nicky Holtzkin, or maybe there was a lot of fatigue coming from that fight against Holtzkin, or maybe he didn't respect Doumbé, who, again, came into this fight with a 55-4-1 record. This is a very solid welterweight fighter, and again, fighting in his home country of France. You knew Doumbé was going to be ready to go, but for whatever reason, Gronhart did not bring it. He looked really flat. He looked lackadaisical. It just looked like he didn't want to be there. I don't know if he was sick or he was hurt coming into the fight. He looked uninterested in fighting Cedric Doumbé in Paris. I'm not really sure what was going through the head of Myrtle Gronhart. And Doumbé, let me get it straight. Doumbé didn't do anything crazy exciting or impressive or really got me like, oh, Cedric Doumbé, he's going to be the next one to beat Nicky Holtzkin. I didn't think anything like that from this matchup. Doumbé did enough to get the win, but this fight was really dragged down by Myrtle's lack of action. And you saw a couple flashes there of what Gronhart can bring to the table, but it wasn't enough to defeat Cedric Doumbé in Paris. And hopefully Doumbé has to fight one more time. I really would be opposed to him getting a title shot based off of this performance. And Gronhart, maybe he has to take some time off before getting back in there. Maybe he got back in there too quickly after the fight against Holtzkin. So maybe sit out a couple of months, reevaluate what you're doing in career, maybe even take a couple fights in another organization that's not really that high pressure, and then maybe come back to glory. But he definitely has to show up better than that if he wants to be guys the caliber of Cedric Doumbé. Lightweight tournament was featured on the Glory 28 Paris main card as Sitsong Pion, Kira, Moziev, and Gregorian all were the four members featured. First fight of the evening, Sitsong Pion took on Kira, and once again, much like that had success in the Husmalen fight, Sitsong Pion used that back kick of his to perfection, to the body, to the arms, to the leg of Kira, and Kira had no answer for it. And he does such a good job with throwing it. Not only is it quick and precise, sometimes he switches up when he's a little closer. He'll throw a knee into that direction. And as the announcers were saying, yeah, he's technically blocking the body or the legs when he hits the arm, but Sitsong is actually aiming for the arms in a lot of cases. And I think that accumulation of damage to that side of Kiria's body, is I kind of trying to show a little bit here of the damage just all along that side there. Kira wasn't able to do anything. His arms and his leg was pretty much battered by the time this fight went along. And I thought Sitsong, not only did he dominate the matchup, but he was very economical, pretty much just using that one technique to beat Kira to move on to the tournament final. Now, in the other tournament semifinal, Gregorian against Mosiev, Gregorian just dominated Mosiev, but you got to give Mosiev credit for hanging around and somehow being able to last all three rounds against Gregorian, who threw an incredible 300 strikes in 9 minutes. I mean, he knocked down Mosiev a couple of times, not enough to get the stoppage, with the tournament being one less than a normal fight. But boy, he just battered him to the head, mainly to the body. But it was just Gregorian's night. He was just overwhelming him with shots, and Mosiev just had no answer against Gregorian. And unfortunately, I think all that effort trying to finish Mosiev and not getting it really hampered Gregorian in the final against Sitsong, where I think he did have some success. I actually think that he probably took a round in that fight against Sitsong, but as the fight got into the second and third round, you could tell Sitsong was the fresher fighter, and was just able to kind of outlast Gregorian, with just, again, nothing crazy, just great combinations. Again, those leg kicks that he's known for, and he was able to get by Merhat to win the tournament final and get back to a title shot against Van Hoosmalen, which, again, I didn't think he had to run through this tournament. I think a lot of people think he didn't have to run through this tournament. He should have already gotten a rematch against Hoosmalen, but Sitsong, they said on the broadcast, didn't want to take it. But you know what? He took this tournament and he dominated it. He got the win over two tough guys in this lightweight division, deserves a shot at the champion again. And the champion better be scared because he has to do something. I find it hard to believe that Sitsong puts that same performance forward, that he gets bailed out again. He has to change something up. And Sitsong's coming. He's hungry. He's ready. And he wants that championship. And he really wants Van Hoosmalen. Main event of the evening in the heavyweight division as Rico Verhoeven took on Brestovic. And not the greatest performance by Verhoeven that we've seen inside the Glory ring, but against Middleton, it was enough to win a 5-round decision and retain his Glory heavyweight championship. And Brestovic just, I don't know if it was flat, I don't know if it was height or reach, just he wasn't doing much and really had no answer for the leg kicks and just overall boxing skill of Verhoeven, who just was really able to stifle Brestovic. Like I said, didn't overexert himself. He really didn't do anything crazy, but he was constantly landing shots, keeping pressure, and Brestovic just, I don't know if he was scared of the power of Verhoeven or maybe in awe of the moment of having the title shot being in the main event, but he didn't perform very well. And like I said, Verhoeven, not his greatest performance, but he's just simply better than Brestovic. For him to show up, and I almost kind of think have an off night, in my opinion, for Verhoeven, and still get a dominating 5-round decision victory over Brestovic, who I believe was the number 2 ranked guy coming into this event. They said off the broadcast as he ran through this division, if he may have, I don't know, we'll see. That heavyweight tournament I'm very intrigued to see next month in Copenhagen to provide Verhoeven's next challenge. But if he's able to beat the winner of that tournament, he may have to move on to MMA or just straight boxing. I don't know. He'll have to do something different because as of right now in Glory, he's not only the most dominant fighter, he's also the most dominant champion they have. And I would love to see him stay in Glory, but if he's running through guys like this, he may have to go other avenues and kind of wait and maybe come back to Glory at another time. But the winner of the tournament in Glory 29 may be Glory's last hope at finding somebody that can compete with Rigo Verhoeven.
Now joining us on the line to talk about Invicta FC 16, the Invicta president herself, Shannon Knapp. And Shannon, thanks for joining me here on Beyond the Cage.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, looking at Invicta FC 16, great night of fights that you had there at the Tropicana in Las Vegas last Friday night, exclusively shown on the UFC Fight Pass. I'll kind of work my way from bottom to the top to the main event of the card with you here a little bit. And I want to start off first with the Aspen Ladd and Kelly McGill fight. Of course, Aspen Ladd, good fighter, but I think a lot of people, despite the injury to Kelly McGill, had a lot of hope and promise about McGill. And for Aspen Ladd, I think to come into this fight and dominate the way she did that kind of surprise you at all against an opponent like Kelly McGill?
Yeah, it's surprising. Maybe to a degree. Yeah. I mean, I thought that, I didn't predict who would come out the victor in that fight, but I certainly thought that, Kelly's very talented, as well as Aspen is very talented. I think that, Aspen's win over Kelly really doesn't damage or hurt her moving forward because, I think that she had quite a long layoff and, this was her first fight back after the injury. So I think they're both incredibly talented, both very young, and I think that you're going to look to – I'd get to meet again at some point, I'm quite sure, in a career. So, but I definitely, Aspen did an amazing job. She did an amazing job. She looked amazing. And I certainly don't want to take away from either one of them because I think they're both incredibly talented. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, But I assure you one thing, you learn a lot more when you walk away with a loss, you know? So definitely look forward to seeing more out of both of them, to be honest with you.
Now, this fight was in the bantamweight division, but Ladd's also done some work in the flyweight division as well. Do you expect her to move back to flyweight or maybe try to stick it out at bantamweight?
No, I want to commend her for her choice to move up. It's my understanding that this is where she's going to stay, that she felt like that it was very too taxing on her body to maintain, to keep, to compete at 125. So she consciously made a decision to move up, feeling that that's where she thought she was going to be the healthiest. And I certainly support that and really commend her for that. A lot of athletes, will try to push themselves into a weight class, maybe that isn't the best for them, and their body takes a lot of abuse. So quite proud of the fact that she was able to identify that, as she matures, that her body's maturing and things are, different, and making a very conscious decision to be more conscientious of her body and move up. So this is my understanding. This is where she's going to stay.
Next fight I want to talk about, Sarah D'Elio against Andrea KGB Lee. This was definitely a very exciting fight between these two ladies. Of course, Andrea Lee had a very good first round, really peppered D'Elio with a lot of great shots using her incredible kickboxing skills. Then in round two, you saw D'Elio get the takedown. She was able to come very close to submitting KGB in the second round. Then in the third round, it looked like Lee was going to get the finish. She had D'Elio back up against the cage, definitely was wobbly, but D'Elio was able to get another takedown and then get a choke. She wasn't able to finish in the second round and get in the third. And first of all, I just want you to comment just on the fight itself, and then second, what did you think about D'Elio's comeback win over KGB?
I thought that was an amazing fight. I thought that was a really good fight. I knew it was going to be very competitively matched coming in. This was Sarah's first time dropping down to 125. And I was curious, how that was going to be for her. It looked like that, she had done a very proper, what I would call a very proper weight cut. She didn't look incredibly dehydrated, so to see her come in and compete, in this new weight division for herself, which is dropping down, and to see her be a strong competitor there, first of all, was exciting enough, but the fight itself was incredible. And, I really thought going into this fight, I knew it was going to be a battle. That I did know. And wasn't sure who was going to win. I think it was a good gauge to test where Andrea Lee is, because she's kind of in that middle ground. You've got a lot of young 125-pounders. You've got a couple in that space where Andrea Lee is at, and then Sarah is what I would consider a veteran. So I thought it was an amazing fight. I mean, that's why they got, fight of the night as well as the co-main event, because I thought it was a great fight. And proud of both of them, their performance, win or lose. I thought they certainly put on a great performance that night.
Now, I want to talk about Andrea Lee for just a second. Of course, in between this fight and her last fight for you in Invicta, she captured the Legacy Flyweight Championship. And does that make scheduling her next or for the future, does that kind of make it a little difficult, considering at least one more fight she'll have an obligation to defend her Legacy title?
No, not at all, because her first obligation is here to Invicta. She's my friend athlete, and, Legacy is very, very conscientious of being very respectful on every aspect in that. So, no, it doesn't make it difficult at all, And when we can't keep it busy, and Andrea Lee is an athlete that wants to compete constantly, and you certainly can't do that because, we have a lot of athletes that want to compete, right? So, this is just an extra way that she continues to hone her skills and perfect, and get the experience that she's going to need, as she continues to grow in the sport. So, no, it hasn't been an issue, and I don't foresee it being an issue.
want to stick with the flyweight division. This was kind of a flyweight heavy card for you. Next up, Roxanne Modafferi against Deanna Bennett. Deanna Bennett moving back up to flyweight, where she was undefeated previously at that weight, take on one of the longtime veterans of the sport in Roxanne. Very close fight between these two ladies, with Roxanne finally getting the edge. And this is another win for Roxanne. And does this put her on a short list for title contention in the division with the win here, Shannon?
Definitely in my world it does. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with Julie in regards to that, but in my world it certainly does. I think we're seeing the best Roxanne Modafferi we've ever seen, to be honest with you. It's really exciting to watch her career and how she's resurrected and, redefined who she is as an athlete and things like that. I'm going to assume we're going to contribute that to, the gym and the coaches, and the things that she's changed in her training and stuff like that. But it's very impressive to see, a veteran, because Roxanne really is a veteran in this sport. And to see her, come out and really own it, and to evolve where, sometimes when you see a veteran sport, they're on the downhill side of the career, and she is definitely an athlete that to be impressed with. She's getting the win, she's looking good doing it. So I'm quite impressed with her.
Now for Deanna Bennett, as I mentioned, moving back up to flyweight, she was coming off a loss entering this fight for your strawweight championship. Do you think maybe she got back in there maybe a little too quickly after the loss? Because it didn't seem like the same Deanna Bennett in this fight. She seemed just a little kind of slow to the punch in this fight against Roxanne, despite not having to cut those 10 extra pounds.
I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to speak with her, but, when you put the weight back on, I'm sure there are factors that, your body goes through that adjustment again. Could that have affected, the speed, the movement, things like that? Absolutely. But, I think that's a conversation really that I need to have with her, to kind of figure out how she felt. And see where she's best served, if she feels her best at 125 or she feels her best at 115. And I just haven't been able to have that conversation yet with her. But she's a very talented athlete, and it could have been a struggle from, cutting down and adjusting to that division and then going back up and adding on that weight. And, could it have thrown things off? I think absolutely. I think, it's highly possible.
Next fight you had was in the bantamweight division, as Irene Aldana took on Jessamine Duke back in your organization here. And Aldana, of course, she came off that loss to Evinger not too long ago, but boy, she looked good in this one and was able to land that nice straight right to Jessamine Duke that floored the former Ultimate Fighter contestant. She followed up with a few more and got the finish there at 308. And despite Duke coming off a couple losses, returning to Invicta, I still think had, a lot of notoriety, with her training partners there in Ronda Rousey. And for Aldana, I think to finish her in the first round, I thought was awfully impressive.
No, Aldana looked fantastic. She looked fantastic. She's on a great performance. On the side of Jessamine, I think that there's a lot of pressure on Jessamine for, because of the association, and stuff like that. I think that Jessamine is very talented, So I think that, we'll work on getting her back on track and, helping build that confidence back up. But, certainly, I mean, Aldana looked fantastic. I mean, she looked good. I love it when you got a good fight, and in the striking sense, it's kind of like poetry. It just flows. She looks fantastic. I mean, that's about all I can say, is because she really did. She looks great. And we focus moving forward with Jessamine will be to get her back in there. Help her get back on track. And certainly help her build that confidence back, and and we kind of go from there.
Now, with this win, does that, in your mind, put Aldana either right back to a shot at Evinger, or maybe one fight away from getting a chance to avenge that loss?
Yeah, I think Tanya's next opponent has already been announced for the May card, and she's going to be fighting Colleen Schneider. We still have, so I think, we see what happens there, and then, we kind of make the decisions. But it certainly doesn't, yeah, she's right there at the top. She's definitely right there at the top. And, she's already wanting back in, she's after, the belt, which, I think the belt is a great belt. It's beautiful, so I'd be wanting the belt too. So, yeah, I think that you're going to see it probably sooner than too much later, for sure.
Could that be a situation if for whatever reason that either Schneider or Evinger had to bow out due to injury, that Aldana could be someone that fills in that spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we always try to have a backup plan, because unfortunately it's the nature of the business and sometimes things do happen. So yeah, is she someone that we would say, be prepared either way? Yeah, definitely. Like I said, her performance was, a fantastic performance. I think she's really talented. She's right there at the top. She really is.
Next fight he had on tap was in the strawweight division as Angela Hill took a fight on short notice against Stephanie Agink. It's been a while since Stephanie has been able to fight for you, and even though she lost, I thought she looked really good in this fight. I thought her length and height was really giving Angela Hill problems, who normally has the height and reach against almost every other opponent not named Stephanie Agink in the strawweight division. And I think that was kind of throwing her off a little bit. And then finally in round 2, she was able to land that first straight right. And then about 30 seconds later, she was able to follow it up with another one. And that was the one that did Stephanie in. And I think for Angela Hill, it's got to be nice for you that you were able to take someone on 12 days notice and able to get a knockout finish like that against one of your better strawweight fighters.
Yeah, absolutely. The great thing about, Angela Hill or Aston Red, both had contacted us before the injuries and said, hey, I'm going to be ready. If anything happens, I want that fight. So it made our job really easy when it came to, when we had the 2 injuries, that we had people in place that were more than willing. And, to see her step in and deliver a performance like she did, she's on her second fight, performance of the night bonus, both times. I think she's definitely, she's exciting to watch, She's always ready and she's eager. And that's not a bad thing. When you have an athlete like that stays prepared and ready, and that's pretty much a blessing on my side, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And Stephanie did look great. Stephanie's a great athlete, and I think that, she'll be back. She'll be back, and I think that, she did take that time off. I think that, she jumped back in there, and I think that we'll see her again soon. And I don't worry about her. I think that, she's very talented, and she'll, come around and rise above, this loss.
Now, of course, Alexa Grasso was supposed to be in this matchup. She had to pull out. With Hill's win over Stephanie, does that possibly set up, depending on the amount of time Alexa has to be out, does that set up maybe Angela Hill against Alexis Grasso for possibly a number 1 contenders spot?
Well, I think it certainly could. I think that's a great matchup, and it's certainly one that I've, been mulling around in my head for sure. I think that stylistic, I think it's going to be a very exciting, very fun fight to watch. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that, we could see happen when Alexa is back on the, back healthy and ready to roll.
Co-main event of the evening for the interim flyweight title between Jennifer Maia and Vanessa Porto. For the second time, these 2 ladies have fought, first time in your organization against each other. But I just thought this was a tremendous fight. I thought this was going to be more grappling based. There was some grappling, don't get me wrong, but the stand-up I thought was impressive by both ladies, especially Jennifer Maia, heading into those, the championship rounds. And, Porto came out very strong. I thought she dominated the first 2 rounds, and Maya, she hung tough in there, and in my opinion, swept those final 3 rounds to kind of come from behind to get this victory and get that interim championship. And you really couldn't have asked for a better co-main event, Shannon.
Going into that fight, I knew it was going to be that kind of fight. I knew it was going to be a fight to the end. Vanessa's been waiting quite a long time, to have the championship opportunity, and I knew Jennifer wanted it too. I knew the belt was going back to Brazil, just couldn't be sure who it was going back with. I knew that it was going to be a fight until the end. Being the one that took the belt back to Brazil, there was going to be a lot of pride and a lot of honor in that, and I knew that they were both going to fight for what they wanted, that there would be no quit. So I knew that it was the one fight on the card that I knew it was going to be a battle, and I also was pretty aware that whoever won that belt, that it was going to be a very emotional victory. I mean, I have to tell you, that was probably one of the first times that I ever had tears in my eyes. I mean, you got Jennifer Maya down on the canvas, you got her coach on the canvas, they're both crying, and she doesn't speak a lot of English, but I could certainly, understand my dream, when she said that to me. I mean, it was, those women left it out there, and I'm very, very proud of both of them. For the performance. It was a great fight. So
now, of course, Maya winning the interim title. So is the obvious matchup to make next is her against the actual champion in Barb Honchak. Is that what's next for the flyweight division, or is Barb going to be out a little longer?
That's a conversation that still needs to be had. There was some talk of Barb moving down in weight, so, I need to speak with Barb and her management and see where she's at and see what she wants to do. She is a champ, and it was definitely, I've got to commend her too, because she knew she needed more time. She had an injury, she moved, she changed everything in her life. She was looking for a new gym, acclimating herself all the way around, trying to make that decision between weight, which division she was really going to focus on, and she's the one that came to us, and said, I don't think it's fair that while I'm going through these things that people are waiting, so I really commend her for stepping forward and being such a gracious champion, I don't know that everybody would be like that, so we're very supportive of Barb. She's incredibly talented. She's been the champ for a long time. So, we'll have that conversation and then be able to convey to everyone, what her plan is.
If Barb still needs some time, or like you said, possibly drops down to strawweight, which is something that she's been considering, would Roxanne, with her win over Bennett, would she be the one to step in and face Maya next?
I definitely think, like I said, I haven't had that conversation with Julie, but in my world, she is the one that's standing there. She's the one that, standing there definitely, I think, has earned it. So in my world, that would be the obvious choice, yes. Unless everybody else has something else to say and I'm missing something, but, my thought process is that, yes, she would be the next.
Main event of the evening was for the atomweight championship, as Hamasaki tried to defend her title for the first time against Amber Brown. And, talk about the co-main event expected grappling. Well, we got the grappling here in the main event. It was back and forth between these two ladies, with Amber Brown. Great elbows there in the first round, really kind of stifled Hamasaki. In the second round, you saw Brown kind of go more on the defensive, get some top control, with Hamasaki countering and avoiding those elbows. And then the third round, you had a scramble there for that armbar, until eventually Hamasaki was able to secure that in the third round to defend her title successfully there for the first time. And Amber Brown, of course, about half as much experience as Hamasaki, but I think despite that experience gap, I thought performed very well, and I think she'll be back. I'm sure another contender will fill in the place next against Hamasaki, but I really was impressed by Amber Brown against a veteran there like Hamasaki.
Oh, me too. The thing is that I think all the fights were great that night. I think it was an amazing card. I think all the athletes really came in and worked hard. Amber is incredibly talented. I think that, this is just the beginning for her. I think we will see her back stronger than ever. And, that was a great fight. And, any way you look at it, both athletes, the champ and the challenger, did an amazing job. It was a very entertaining fight.
Now, who do you think might be next for Hamasaki?
I think Jen is right up there too as well. Jody, that's a good division for us. We've got a lot of talented athletes. We're coming off, a few days after the fights and stuff, and my focus has been the next fight coming up, and of course settlement and things like that. So Julie and I will meet tomorrow and kind of go through everything, but there's a lot of talent in that division, and we've got some, like I said, we've got challengers that are right there ready, and I think Jen is definitely one of them.
All right. Before I get you out of here, I wanted to ask you this. Of course, you started primarily doing events in Kansas City, and really in the last year, 18 months, you've really spread out, going to different states and different areas, going back to Las Vegas for this event. And I'm mainly asking this for myself and my co-hosts, because we're a Michigan-based podcast. But is there any chance maybe here in 2016 you come to Southeast Michigan, or perhaps Southern Ontario, or even in Northern Ohio, near our neck of the woods? Is there any plan for that area to come to?
Certainly, we've had some venues and reach out to us in the Ohio area. So we're open to going, where the fans want us to go. I think it all comes down to, finding the right venue and the right fit and the deal that makes sense for us to go into those areas. So, yeah, I think it's highly possible. We may not make it up to Michigan, but we may make it to Ohio this year for sure.
All right, I can live with that.
At least it's closer.
Yes.
And as we broke down the fights, I do want to mention, Ashley Greenway and Sarah Click, that kicked off the card. That was a great fight. You had two athletes that were new to the promotion, and, sometimes, you never know. Something can look great on paper, but when they step in there, with all, it's tuned up, with a lot of people watching, the pressure's a lot harder. And I thought both of those athletes really put on a great show to kick off the card. So I just kind of wanted to mention that as well.
She is Shannon Knapp, and president of Invicta Fighting Championships. Of course, you can follow the official Invicta Twitter at Invicta Fights. And Shannon, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to Invicta 17.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having us. And, most of all, thank you for supporting us. So we really greatly appreciate it. We really do care about our fans.
Once again, that was Invicta President Shannon Knapp right here on Beyond the Cage.
All right, as you just heard, that was Shannon Knapp, Invicta FC President, talking about Invicta FC 16. And let's now move on to the final part of our show, and that will be talking about UFC Fight Night Brisbane, or UFC Fight Night 85, Hunt versus Mir in the main event. 6 fights will be shown on the main card for Fox Sports 1 on Saturday, March 19th, and I believe Sunday the 20th, if you're actually watching it live in person in Australia. The first fight of the evening will be in the women's strawweight division, as Sohee Ham will take on Rowdy Beck Rawlings. Looking at this fight, Ham comes in with a 1-1 UFC record. Her last fight was a win over Courtney Casey at Fight Night 79, and 14 of her 16 career victories are by decision. Looking at Beck Rawlings, a 1-1 in the UFC as well. Her last fight It's been a while. UFC Fight Night 65 was her last fight, and that was in the spring of last year over Lisa Ellis, and 4 of her 6 career victories are by submission. Now, one thing that I think will help Beck Rawlings will be the fact that Ham is kind of a slow starter. Now, she did pick up the pace a little bit against Courtney Casey, but historically over her career kind of has been a slow start and obviously is in for the long haul with 14 of her 16 career victories coming by decision. But that is just about the complete opposite of Beck Rawlings, who, like I said, 4 of 6 by submissions. She also has 1 knockout in her record, only 1 decision victory, and that happened a while ago. That was in 2012 at Valor Fight 1. So it's been a while since she has been to a decision on the winning end. She has lost 3 of her 4 victories by decision. So that could bode well in the favor of the Korean if this does go the full 15 minutes. But if Beck Rawlings can keep this thing out of the 3rd round, she has a better chance of winning. And the last fight was actually May of 2015. So not quite a full year, but of course still overcoming a injury. Ham is definitely tough, but I think Beck Rawlings, with that pressure, that intensity, she likes to move forward a lot, I think will give Ham some problems in this one. And let's not forget, fighting in her home country of Australia, I think that's a big deal as well. And I think maybe extra boost could be the difference against the Korean. The next fight of the evening will be in the middleweight division as James T. Hunter will take on Steve Bossy. It's been a while since T. Hunter has graced the octagon. In fact, his last fight was June of 2014, so nearly 2 years since he's been in the octagon. And when he did leave, he was on a 3-fight losing streak, and that includes his last fight, which was a loss to Nate Marquardt. Get this, this was Fight Night 43. We're now at Fight Night 85, so it's been a while since T. Hunter has been in there. He's taking on Steve Bossy, 0-1 in the UFC. His only appearance was against Thiago Santos at Fight Night 70. He got knocked out in 30 seconds. 8 of his 10 career victories are by decision. Of course, Bossy actually was supposed to fight Maldonado, 6 card in Montreal, but however, we all know how that went down with Rampage Jackson finally settling things, coming back, at least fighting Maldonado. Now, of course, Rampage Jackson back in Bellator as the courts have kind of reversed the decision. So Steve Bossy only officially 1 UFC appearance, did not go very well for him. So very interesting matchup here. Like I said, T. Hunter hasn't fought in the UFC in nearly 2 years. He also has a lot of knockouts to his credit, 10 of 16 wins by knockout. Comes into this fight riding a 3-fight losing streak. He hasn't fought in any other organization since losing to Nate Marquardt in June of 2014. And this will be at the middleweight division, which will be T. Hunter's 2nd attempt in the middleweight division. Of course, his first attempt was the fight against Nate Marquardt. And from what I remember, he was a big middleweight in that fight, so should be pretty big in this matchup against Steve Bossy, where it has easily the chance to be fight of the night and earn one of these guys a performance opponent, possibly for a knockout. 18 knockouts between these two gentlemen. I find it very hard to believe it will go a full 15 minutes, and there's not too much technical about this fight. I think somebody's going to land a big punch and knock the other out silly. The only difference, T. Hunter sometimes does like to clinch and sometimes likes to get on top, but his power, more times than not, usually finishes somebody. And obviously Bossy's power as well. So if there's any X factor, if there's any chance it does go 15, it's because T. Hunter tries to grind his opponent. But I think being out of action so long, fighting in basically his home country there in Australia, at least now where he lives and trains the majority of the time, I think he's going to want to prove something. I think he's going to want to go in there and get another knockout. So that's my thinking. Of course, Bossy's trying to erase that 30-second head kick knockout at the hands of Thiago Santos. So both have something to prove in this matchup in the middleweight division. Also in the middleweight division, Antonio Carlos Jr. will take on Dan Kelly. Looking at Dan Kelly, he is 3-1 in the UFC. His last fight got back on the winning track against Steve Montgomery at UFC 193. And of his 10 career victories, 5 are by submission. Looking at Antonio Carlos Jr., 2-1 with a no contest in the UFC. That no contest came in his last fight against Kevin Casey, and that was back at Fight Night 80. 4 of his 5 career victories are by submission. Interesting matchup here because Antonio Carlos Jr., since moving down to middleweight from light heavyweight, is a huge guy in this division. Now, didn't see it as much in the Casey fight. That kind of ended prematurely there with the eye pokes. But in his previous fight against Eddie Truck Gordon, he really showed off his size and grappling ability. Now, I think Antonio Carlos Jr. is probably the better jiu-jitsu guy, but Dan Kelly, of course, being a 4-time judo Olympian for Australia, he's going to be a tough guy to take down and really a tough guy to put in a compromising position. Not saying that Antonio Carlos Jr. can't do it or can't catch him in a submission, but even with the size difference, judo is based on skill, technique, leverage, pressure, not so much basis on power. So that allows someone that may be a little smaller and not as strong in Dan Kelly to still be hard to take down and still possibly have an advantage in the grappling department. Now, when it comes standing, neither are that great, but again, I'd give a power edge to Antonio Carlos Jr. just because of the size difference. This one's going to be really interesting. Neither has been too overly exciting, but both have a lot of skills, especially in grappling. And you never know, sometimes that cancels each other out and you see two guys just out there scrapping. We'll see. It should be an interesting fight here in the middleweight division. Lightweight divisions on tap next, as we have two of the young rising stars in the lightweight division going up against each other, as Johnny Case will take on Jake Matthews. Looking at Jake Matthews, 3-1 so far in the UFC. His last fight, a win over Arreola at UFC 193, and 8 of his 9 career victories are by finish with 4 knockouts and 4 submissions apiece. Looking at Johnny Case, 4-0 in the UFC and overall riding a 12-fight winning streak. His last fight was a win over Jan Cabral at Fight Night 77, and 12 of his 22 career victories are by knockout. Very, very good matchup here in the lightweight division. As I said, two of the up-and-coming guys in the division. The big difference, though, between these two is going to be the height and reach that Johnny Case will possess. Johnny Case is listed at 6'1", Jake Matthews at 5'9". That's going to be a huge difference for a guy I already perceive as the better striker in Johnny Case. Now, if Jake Matthews can get on the inside, either for clinch work, obviously boxing shots, and some takedowns, he may be able to find some success. However, Johnny Case is a tough guy to take down. But if he can take him down, we did see in the Jan Cabral fight that he still does have some work to do off his back and with submission defense. Now, Jake Matthews is no Jan Cabral by any means in his jiu-jitsu, but that still is an area Jake Matthews could exploit. Again, granted, he can take Johnny Case down, which is easier said than done. If it stays standing, Johnny Case knows how to use his range. He knows how to use his kick and keep his distance. And if it stays at that on the feet, I think Jake Matthews is going to get frustrated in this fight, and that could lead to a possible mess up, maybe throwing something looping, and Johnny could counter and possibly get a knockout. Welterweight division sees the return of former Bellator middleweight champion Hector Lombard as he takes on the Grim Reacher, unofficial nickname there, of Neil Magny. Looking at Lombard since he last left the UFC, 3-2 and 1 no contest. That no contest, of course, in his last fight against Josh Berkman. That was at UFC 182. That suspended the former Bellator champion for nearly, actually a little over a year now, returning to his home country of Australia, or at least where he spent a lot of time in Australia. And looking at Hector Lombard, 19 of his 34 career victories are by knockout. So he's definitely going to have the power advantage over Neil Magny, who is, man, he's in the main event of Fight Night 78, and 9 of his 17 career victories are by decision. Now, much like the last fight I talked about with Johnny Case and Jake Matthews, we're going to see another huge disparity in size, in reach, and height, as you got Hector Lombard around 5'8", I believe, and Neil Magny at 6'2". Neil Magny almost always has the reach advantage, and in this case, he'll have it by the height. However, the power advantage, as I said, goes with Hector Lombard. This dude has absolute lightning in his hands, and that's why he was called Lightning Lombard. I believe he changed it now to Show Weather, is what SheerDog.com reports that. So I'm not really sure when the change happened, but regardless, he has tremendous power and can end this fight at any point. Neil Magny, you can't really say that. There, he's got accumulations of shots, and I don't believe Hector Lombard's been finished by knockout, and if he has, it hasn't been in a very long time. And for Neil Magny to really be successful, he has to use that reach, that pace, the conditioning that he's known for. He's got to move in and out of the pocket, keep circling, and really just avoid the power there of Hector Lombard, because you can't take too many of those shots from Lombard. And it's an interesting matchup, because if he can get inside, that being Lombard, or land those power shots, and Magny maybe has to kind of go into wrestling mode. Lombard, of course, he's no stranger to judo as well. He is very, 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 very tough to take down, especially at 170, where he's even more compact and more towards his natural weight class. So it's going to be tough for Neil Magny to really change game plans other than moving in and out and trying to frustrate Lombard, you know, with little kicks and jabs and feints and stuff like that. If he can do that, I think he can win this fight. But if he gives in and gets in the pocket, Hector Lombard can end this with one punch. Also, Lombard's never been finished in his career at 4 losses. All of his losses have been by decision. So he's going to be a tough guy to erase that margin, and I'm not sure if Neil Magny's the guy to do that. But big matchup in the welterweight division. The winner really puts themselves closer to a title shot. You know, for Neil Magny, that's kind of what he's been searching for, validation. He got a little bit there, but Gastelum. But if he can be a guy like Hector Lombard in kind of being the away guy there in Australia, that really bodes well for him moving up and getting bigger names and getting some respect in this welterweight division. And for Lombard, he did have the problem with PEDs stemming from his last fight, but if he wins, it doesn't necessarily erase it, but it doesn't put him that far where he was before the suspension and the Josh Berkman fight. Getting to the main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, former UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir will take on the Super Samoan Mark Hunt. Looking at Hunt, 6-4-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Antonio Bigfoot Silva at UFC 193, and 8 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Frank Mir, all but 2 of his fights have happened inside the octagon with a 16-10 UFC record. His last fight, he lost to Andrei Arlovski at UFC 191, and 9 of his 18 career victories are by submission. I think there's going to be a finish some way, somehow, in this matchup between these two heavyweights. Either Frank Mir is going to get a submission, or Mark Hunt's going to get a knockout. Now, Mark Hunt does have some decent takedown defense. However, as we've said a couple times, if he gets to his back, there's really nothing he can do to try to match the jiu-jitsu skill of Frank Mir, and that is a huge thing. Now, boxing-wise, Frank Mir does have some solid boxing. He has gotten some knockouts. However, Mark Hunt is a notoriously tough guy to take out. Now, he has been knocked out 4 times in his career, but it's usually with accumulation of shots. Nothing's happened one punch that he's gotten knocked out. I think really besides his fight against the Melvin Manhoef in 2008, 8 years ago, where he got knocked out 18 seconds in the first round, that's about it. 3rd round knockout, lost to JDS. 2nd round knockout to Verdum, of course, caught with that huge knee. And then Stipe, you know, accumulation of punches, but that was in round 5. So Mark Hunt does have a very good chin, and that should help him in this matchup. But if he gets wobbled at all, Frank Mir can take advantage of that and pounce with a submission. Now, really kind of leading up to the Verdum fight, his fight against Bigfoot Silva, and of course the fight in Roy Nelson, Hunt was on a little bit of a roll. Now, even though he lost against Verdum, I thought he performed very well in that fight. Then, to me, took a step back and looked completely awful against Stipe Miocic in his loss in May of last year. Fought Bigfoot Silva. a guy kind of on his last legs. However, he was still able to knock out the Brazilian in the first round, once again fighting in his home country for the third time in a row. I think that does kind of bode well for Hunt. I think he's comfortable fighting at home, and for him, I guess he looked in pretty good shape for his last fight against Bigfoot Silva. Both guys are kind of on their last legs of their career. Nobody's getting a title shot after this or anything, or maybe even getting a title shot soon, but it should be a fun main event, and I am looking forward to it considering how long these guys have been in the sport of MMA, and they've never faced each other so far, at Mark Hunt being 41 and Frank Mir now being 36. So it should make for an interesting main event, which for sure shouldn't go the allotted 5 rounds. Time to get to picks here for UFC Fight Night Brisbane. I'll start first with the women's strawweight division, Sohee Ham against Beck Rawlings. I really like Beck Rawlings in this matchup. I think her constant pressure and aggressive nature will be a lot for Ham to handle, and give me the Australian to win. James T. Hunter against Steve Bossy. I think the Canadian definitely has a chance. He has that knockout power in his hands, but I think James T. Hunter, again, kind of fighting at home, I think has a lot to prove. Coming off of about a 2-year layoff and a 3-fight losing streak, I think he'll have a lot to prove, and I'll take him for the win. Antonio Carlos Jr. against Dan Kelly. I think this is maybe the toughest fight to pick on this card. It's hard for me to give an edge really to either guy, but I'm going to go with Dan Kelly. I think that judo skill will be hard for Antonio Carlos Jr. to try to overcome to get to being on top, in top control. So give me the Australian to win that one. Johnny Case is taking on Jake Matthews next in the lightweight division. Of course, Johnny Case is the friend of the show, so maybe I'm a little biased, but I think Johnny Case is just a little better at this stage in his career than Jake Matthews, and I think Matthews is going to have a hard time trying to get in on the much taller and longer Johnny Case. So give me Hollywood to win this one. Co-main event of the evening in the welterweight division, Hector Lombard will take on the Grim Reacher, Neil Magny. I think Lombard's going to have a hard time getting inside and dealing with the constant movement and feints and fakes and of Neil Magny. I think that's going to be hard for him to overcome. He's probably going to land a shot or two. I think he is, but I think Magny will have the right game plan and stick to moving around and not get caught in the pocket and get hit with one of those powerful shots one too many times. So give me the Grim Reacher. Main event, Mark Hunt against Frank Mir. I think Frank Mir probably has more chances to win this fight between knockout and submission, and obviously being a little taller and longer, but there's just something about Mark Hunt. I don't know what it is. I'm going with Mark Hunt. I just think he'll be able to land one of those punches with Mir coming in or with his guard down or something. I think he'll end the night of the former UFC champion. Well, that about does it for this week's show. I'd like to thank Shannon Knapp for coming on to the show and talking Invicta with me. I also like to thank our partners at MMAforlife.ca, MMAinsider.net, the great Facebook blog, MMA Fight Club. Please like their page today at MMA Fight Club. Of course, our good friends running the memorabilia game there, MMASignaturesUSA.com. And for our partners normally here, Billy Brandt and Colin Camper, they should be back next week on the show. We'll, of course, recap this fight I just talked about. So for them, of course, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. I'm also on Instagram at the Jim Gramm. So until next week, thanks again for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.